A lot of times people are lured over here with the promise of a better life, a better job situation. Sometimes they have romantic connections to the people who bring them into the country. And then when they're here, they're psychologically and physically, but the psychological tentacles, I think, of dependency are much more insidious, because they're broken down and beaten into believing that there is no other reality for them. Understand is that there is a psychological dimension of dependency, a desperation that really happens when your spirit, your soul, your body have been broken down to where you don't even think of yourself as a human being with human dignity. You're just a machine that is used by these perpetrators. In 2007, Senate Bill 1283 expanded the definition of human trafficking to go beyond just the transportation meaning of the word, to include coercive tactics, which is what we were just talking about, the techniques, and also trafficking goes beyond transportation, which means really exploitation. Then in 2008, Senate Bill 1288 called for, and I think this is very important in terms of the I-10 corridor, called for the mandatory posting of rescue hotlines and emergency numbers in hotel rooms, so that obviously since I-10 is such a hotspot, that people in trouble could have access to these numbers if need be. So, yeah. Part of the problem is that we have a lot of denial in other countries, and a lot of, for whatever reason, legitimate and not, sometimes it's very bad press to talk about that. So I would imagine that there is definitely a component of that. But no, I don't think it's enough, and I think that everything that we can do, especially in terms of education and awareness, because outreach to the victims, but also, and tougher legislative measures, which this bill also tries to do, are incredibly important. I know that unfortunately, Italy is invaded and plagued by prostitution. And as a child, I used to take a certain route to go to the beach with my parents, and it was a beautiful street that was in the middle of the pine tree forest and led straight to the beach. So I used to enjoy it very much. And then I moved away, and then I came back and went back home, and I had a very rude awakening, because the entire street is now lined with prostitutes, and some of these people, some of these girls don't look older than 15, and you have the entire multicultural spectrum. You have the women from obviously from Africa. Most of them are from Nigeria, and then you have now, especially with the breakdown, of course, of the Eastern Bloc, you have the Albanians and the Polish and the Romanians. So it's a very sad spectacle, and it affected me very much as a young girl, and then it keeps affecting me. One of such organizations has vans that travel through the worst parts of the city at night, and they provide not only the basic assistance such as food and in some cases condoms, but also they provide medical assistance, and in a number of cases, successfully, they have provided an alternative and reintegration into society. And I think that's very important.
Actually, every Saturday with Houston Rescue and Restore, a group of us, we go out into the community and we talk to local business owners. We ask them to put up posters, we inform them what's going on right next door pretty much. And usually they're really responsive because they don't know that's happening. 25% of all the human trafficking in the United States happens right here in Houston. So right in our own backyard. Per square mile, there is more sex-oriented businesses, not necessarily trafficked businesses, but sex-oriented businesses. It's more than Las Vegas. So there's actually a big part of human trafficking is the demand. People don't really want to address that, but we wouldn't have it without the demand for it. I actually was coming out of the library the other day, and a girl asked, well, what is human trafficking? And someone's like, oh, I think it's just like taking people across the border. Like, you know, illegal immigrants or something. It's not. It's actually people being held against their will for, you know, sex trade. There's a labor trade, but it's modern day slavery. It's not just people coming illegally across. It's modern day slavery.
Well, Houston is the sex trade capital of the Western Hemisphere. I guess there are more people involved with the sex trade per capita in Houston than in Las Vegas, and I've heard more than, you know, in anywhere else in the U.S. A lot of young people in Houston are not aware of that fact, and because of that, there's a need for people here, but they also are transported out of this area from this hub. Part of the problem is that international human trafficking, human trafficking laws are mainly international and national. Therefore, local authorities do not always both arrest and prosecute on the local level. So changing Texas laws has been one of the jobs that Houston Rescue and Restore and the Coalition Against Human Trafficking have undertaken, and they've passed several laws already. They've successfully pushed several laws through the Texas legislature. Some of these spas have the women actually live there in very tiny cubicles, and they don't speak the language, so they usually can't help. They're also threatened and beaten, and those who try to escape are killed outright, and sometimes killed in front of the other women, sometimes torched and burned in front of the other women, which of course creates massive amounts of fear in the women, in the girls, because they're girls, trying to escape. So that's a problem, you know. And I think there's a big mystery about the fate of these women. I don't think that that's entered into the whole debate yet. What happens to these women? I believe that, I'm worried that many of them are eventually are killed. But the reason why they go undetected is because most of them don't speak English. And then by the time they get any English language skills, they're frightened to take action because these men are so ruthless. The kids that run away from home, and they run away from home usually because they've been molested sexually, so they're already scarred in that way. They within 24, 48 hours of being hitting the streets, they're usually approached by often by some member of either the sex trafficking trade or drug trafficking trade. I think people are not aware of how many street kids have been damaged in this way. And the more society gets this information and feels repugnance towards this treatment of young people, the more rapidly I think that swift action by the government and by law enforcement agencies will be taken. But as long as the population is indifferent or turns its back on this situation, the longer it will be perpetrated. Even if you look in newspapers, like you just look at Houston, at the Houston Press, some of their ads, some of them indicate to me that they're selling people for sex. It's very clear that some of them are advertising very young people available for sex. So if the editors of Houston Press, which is affiliated with, I think, with the New York Times, I mean, if they're willing to run advertisements for these organizations, I mean, we're kind of doomed, you know.